Right now, millions of Americans are being hit from every direction at once, and the impact is impossible to ignore. From brutal winter storms stretching across half the country, to newly released documents, reopening one of the most disturbing scandals in recent history, to immigration battles spilling into the streets and shutting down parts of the government, this is one of those moments where multiple national crises collide at the same time. And for many families, the consequences are unfolding in real time. We begin with the weather emergency gripping the nation tonight. A powerful winter storm is tearing through the southeast, bringing life-threatening freezing temperatures to as many as 160 million Americans. The cold stretches far beyond what many would expect, reaching deep into the south, all the way to the Florida Everglades. States already struggling to recover from last week's deadly storm are now facing another round of snow, ice, and extreme cold, with some areas expecting up to a foot of snow. Roads are becoming increasingly dangerous. Crews are struggling to keep up, and travel is grinding to a halt. More than 2,000 flights have already been canceled, leaving travelers stranded and airports overwhelmed. In the West, dense fog contributed to a massive chain reaction crash involving dozens of vehicles, shutting down a major highway for hours. In Tennessee, where tens of thousands remain without power from the previous storm, the National Guard has been called in to help clear debris as freezing temperatures continue to hold steady. Along the southeast coast, flooding is also becoming a growing concern as the storm system intensifies. Our weather team is tracking conditions minute by minute, but the danger is already clear. Snow is falling heavily across the Carolinas, with gusty winds creating near-whiteout conditions in areas that rarely experience winter weather of this magnitude. From Georgia to Maryland, residents are bracing for wind gusts reaching up to 70 miles per hour. In places like Virginia Beach, where snow is uncommon, and temperatures typically hover in the 50 seconds this time of year, the mercury has dropped into the 20 seconds, forcing crews into around-the-clock preparation mode. The storm's impact is being felt far beyond local roads. Major airline hubs are shutting down operations. Delta's Atlanta hub has been heavily disrupted, while American Airlines canceled all flights out of its Charlotte hub. Even NASCAR was forced to postpone a major race as safety concerns mounted. And this is only the beginning. As the storm system moves north, bitter Arctic air is expected to follow, bringing sub-freezing temperatures to areas as far south as Orlando and Houston. Meanwhile, the Northeast is already deep in the grip of prolonged cold. Cities like New York and Philadelphia are nearing their longest stretch of days below freezing in nearly a decade. The cold is relentless, and for many, it's becoming exhausting. On the West Coast, the dangers look different, but are no less serious, as fog and reduced visibility turn highways into hazards, leaving multiple people injured in pileups that underscore just how unforgiving these conditions can be. Meteorologists warn that the system is rapidly intensifying overnight, meaning snowfall and wind speeds will increase sharply. In the Carolinas alone, an additional 6 inches of snow could fall before morning. As the storm exits, the cold air will surge in behind it, triggering freeze warnings from Houston through the Florida Peninsula. In some areas, temperatures may fall low enough to break long-standing records, with Miami expected to feel below freezing conditions rarely seen in that region. And as this dangerous weather continues to unfold, another storm is brewing. Not in the skies, but in courtrooms, government offices, and across the country, following the release of millions of pages of documents tied to Jeffrey Epstein. A development that is once again forcing the nation to confront how power, privilege, and justice collided in one of the most disturbing criminal cases of our time. Late this week, the Department of Justice released more than 3 million pages of records, including thousands of videos and hundreds of thousands of images, shedding new light on Epstein's network and the decisions that allowed him to avoid serious consequences for years. Among the most striking revelations is a prosecution memo and draft indictment written nearly 2 decades ago. In that document, Florida prosecutors detailed evidence they said showed Epstein was a continued danger to the community, citing his repeated enticement of underage girls. The memo outlined a sweeping 60-count indictment that, if filed, could have drastically altered the course of the case. But that indictment was never pursued. Instead, Epstein was allowed to plead guilty to far lesser state prostitution charges, serving just 13 months in jail, much of it under lenient conditions. When he was released, he returned to a life of wealth, travel, and access to powerful people, remaining largely untouched until his federal arrest in 2019. The newly released files also include communications between Epstein and influential figures in business, entertainment, and sports. One set of messages shows Epstein corresponding with New York Giants co-owner Steve Tisch, discussing introductions to women and arranging travel. In one exchange, Epstein suggested organizing airfare for a young microbiology student, advising Tisch to make the arrangements clear. Tisch has acknowledged a brief association, stating the emails involved adult women and emphasizing that he never visited Epstein's island or accepted any invitations. He has since said he deeply regrets any association with Epstein. Former Prince Andrew is once again under scrutiny, as newly released photos place him back in the spotlight. The images show the former British royal crouched over a young woman, though the date and context remain unclear. Prince Andrew was stripped of his royal titles last year due to his relationship with Epstein, and his representatives have not responded to requests for comment regarding the newly released material. The documents also contain numerous unverified tips and unsubstantiated allegations involving powerful figures across politics, finance, and entertainment. The Department of Justice has emphasized that many of these claims were investigated and found to be unfounded. Officials have pushed back against accusations that the department sought to protect high-profile individuals, stating that victim protection was always the priority. But for many survivors, the latest release has only deepened their frustration and anger. Several victims say their names were not properly redacted, exposing them once again to public scrutiny. One survivor, Charlene Richard, says she has lost faith in the justice system entirely, accusing the department of failing to consider the harm caused to survivors by the way the records were released. Her reaction reflects a broader sentiment among victims who believe accountability remains incomplete, even years after Epstein's death. Now, bipartisan lawmakers who pushed for the disclosure are questioning what remains unseen. They are demanding an in-person briefing to review the full scope of the files, including millions of pages that were not released to the public. The push suggests that the Epstein case, far from being closed, continues to raise unanswered questions about how justice is applied when immense power is involved. As attention remains fixed on these revelations, another crisis is unfolding on the streets of American cities. Immigration enforcement efforts have sparked protests nationwide, and in Minneapolis, those tensions have escalated into a legal battle. A federal judge has denied Minnesota's request to temporarily halt federal immigration operations in the state, ruling that the balance of harm does not justify an injunction. The decision comes as demonstrations continue and new information emerges about expanded powers granted to immigration agents. According to a memo obtained by ABC News, the Department of Homeland Security has broadened the authority of immigration officers, allowing them to make certain arrests without a warrant. Protesters have condemned the move, arguing it increases the risk of abuse and erodes civil liberties. At the same time, President Trump has stated that federal agents will no longer assist in managing protests unless requested by local leaders, while still deploying DHS officials to protect federal property. In Minneapolis, demonstrators have taken their message directly to businesses, staging sit-ins at Target stores, urging the company to take a stronger stance against immigration enforcement actions in the state where it is headquartered. Target has responded by saying it has no agreements with immigration agencies. Meanwhile, outrage continues over the detention of a 5-year-old boy and his father outside their home, a case that has become a flashpoint in the national debate and is now drawing the attention of federal judges as questions mount about how immigration enforcement is being carried out and who is being caught in the middle. The case of the 5-year-old boy and his father, both detained outside their home, despite having a pending asylum claim, has ignited outrage across the country. Legal advocates argue the detentions crossed a moral line, while administration messaging has only intensified the backlash. Today, a federal judge in Texas ordered that the child and his father be released as soon as practicable, and no later than February 3, a ruling that offers relief to one family but does little to quiet the broader controversy. As protests continue, the administration has remained firm in defending its enforcement strategy. President Trump has made clear that federal agents will continue to protect government property, even as he says they will not intervene in demonstrations unless requested by local officials. That stance has done little to calm tensions, especially as communities grapple with the reality of expanded arrest powers for immigration agents and a lack of clarity about how those powers will be used on the ground. The immigration debate is now rippling directly into Congress, triggering a partial government shutdown that began overnight. At the center of the standoff is funding for the Department of Homeland Security. Senators passed a bipartisan package of funding bills late Friday, but deliberately stripped out long-term funding for DHS, giving lawmakers just 2 weeks to negotiate potential reforms to immigration enforcement operations. Until then, DHS remains funded on a temporary basis, and the clock is ticking. Democrats are pushing for significant changes, citing recent incidents tied to immigration enforcement, including the killing of Alex and Renee Good in Minneapolis. Their demands include ending roving patrols by federal agents, holding agents to the same use of force standards as state and local police, banning the use of masks during operations, and requiring body cameras. Supporters say these measures would increase transparency and accountability. Republicans, however, are already pushing back, arguing that some of these restrictions could put agents at risk. While there is bipartisan support for body cameras, GOP leaders say masks are necessary to protect officers from being identified, harassed, or targeted. House leadership is signaling that the shutdown may be short-lived, with the House returning Monday night. Still, Democratic leaders have made it clear they will not fast-track a funding bill without concrete assurances that reforms will actually be implemented. If negotiations stall, the consequences could quickly spread. Federal workers may miss paychecks, and travelers could face delays at airports. Some government services are already protected through the fall, including food assistance programs like SNAP and WIC, but even those programs are facing new changes. Starting immediately, new work requirements tied to SNAP benefits are taking effect. Under legislation passed last year, the age for mandatory work requirements is increasing from 54 to 64 years old. At the same time, exemptions are narrowing. Previously, caregivers of children up to 18 years old were exempt, but that cutoff is now dropping to 14. These changes could result in millions of Americans losing access to food assistance, adding another layer of strain for families already dealing with rising costs and economic uncertainty. As Washington debates policy and funding, tragedy has struck at sea. Off the coast of Massachusetts, the Coast Guard has suspended its search for 6 crew members now presumed dead after their commercial fishing vessel sank in icy waters. The 72-foot boat issued an emergency alert early Friday morning, triggering an extensive rescue effort that stretched across hundreds of miles. Crews battled freezing temperatures, high winds, and rough seas in a desperate attempt to locate survivors. The vessel went down roughly 25 miles off Cape Ann. There was no Mayday call. Instead, officials say an emergency beacon automatically transmitted a distress signal as the ship began to sink. The search involved both aircraft and boats, with rescuers facing life-threatening conditions including 7 to 10-foot seas, sustained winds of 30 knots, and freezing spray that caused ice to build up rapidly. The loss has devastated Gloucester, one of America's oldest fishing ports, and a community deeply connected to the sea. The town's identity, history, and economy are tied to fishing, making the tragedy feel personal to nearly everyone who lives there. A growing memorial now lines the harbor, as families and neighbors grieve together and wait for answers. The cause of the shipwreck remains under investigation, and for now, closure feels distant. As the nation absorbs this loss, more headlines are emerging, including an arrest involving one of the fastest athletes in the world. Olympic sprinter Sha'Carri Richardson is facing legal trouble after police say she was driving at extreme speeds in Florida, an incident now captured on newly released video that is raising questions about judgment and accountability. Even for those accustomed to life in the public eye. Olympic sprinter Sha'Carri Richardson was arrested in Florida this week after police say she was caught driving at more than 100 miles per hour in a 65-mile-per-hour zone. According to authorities, dash camera video shows Richardson speeding past a patrol car before being pulled over. In the footage, she is heard pleading with the officer, repeatedly asking to be let go. Despite her appeals, police arrested her, towed her vehicle, and later released her after she posted a $500 bond. The incident did not end there. Police also arrested Richardson's boyfriend, fellow Olympic sprinter Christian Coleman, when he arrived at the scene. Officers say he interfered with Richardson's arrest, adding another layer to a situation that has quickly drawn national attention. For an athlete whose career has already been shaped by controversy, the arrest underscores how even brief lapses in judgment can carry serious consequences, regardless of fame or talent. As the story spread, it added to an already crowded news cycle filled with warnings, deadlines, and reminders that affect everyday Americans. One of those reminders is aimed squarely at travelers. Starting tomorrow, flying without a real ID or another acceptable form of identification, such as a passport, could cost passengers an additional $45 at the airport. The real ID is an upgraded driver's license marked with a star, designed to meet federal security standards. While most travelers already have one, the TSA says about 6% of flyers still do not, and those travelers may now face delays and extra fees as enforcement ramps up. For many, this change comes at a difficult time, as weather disruptions, canceled flights, and staffing challenges are already making travel more stressful and expensive. Officials urge travelers to check their identification before heading to the airport to avoid last-minute complications that could derail their plans. Tonight also brings the loss of a familiar face from American television. Demond Wilson, best known for his role alongside Red Fox on the beloved 1970s sitcom Sanford and Son, has passed away. Beyond his work as an actor, Wilson was also an ordained minister, dedicating much of his later life to faith and service. He died at his home in California at the age of 79, leaving behind a legacy that resonated with generations of viewers who grew up watching him on screen. As the broadcast continues, the focus shifts from headlines filled with conflict and loss to stories of resilience and quiet heroism. Across the country, millions of people have spent the past week digging out, cleaning up, and trying to return to normal as winter storms continue to pound their communities. For many, there has been no such thing as a snow day. First responders, public works crews, and utility workers have been braving brutal conditions to keep others safe. In New York City, firefighters have faced the threat of frostbite and hypothermia while responding to emergencies and clearing fire hydrants buried under snow. In Silver Spring, Maryland, road crews have worked around the clock, using snowblowers to clear intersections and keep traffic moving. In New York, MTA workers have been out in the cold overnight, clearing subway platforms and tracks to keep trains running despite the weather. In Portland, Tennessee, linemen have worked from sunup to sundown, restoring power after storms knocked out electricity to thousands of homes. Standing on icy roads and climbing frozen poles, they have pushed through exhaustion to reconnect communities that rely on heat and light to survive the cold. The work is dangerous, often thankless, and essential. One small moment captured the spirit of gratitude many feel toward these workers. During a break, dozens of linemen sat down for lunch at a local restaurant. Without fanfare, a local realtor named Wally Gilliam picked up the tab. He said it was a simple way to say thank you to people who do so much for others and are rarely recognized for it. For the workers, a hot meal and a warm gesture meant more than words. As another difficult week draws to a close, these moments of humanity stand out against the backdrop of storms, protests, and uncertainty. And as Americans look ahead, the challenges aren't over yet. With more cold on the way, and major decisions looming in Washington that could shape what comes next. Shaping what comes next for millions of people across the country as both natural and political storms continue to unfold. Forecasters warn that the brutal cold gripping much of the nation is far from over. As the latest system moves out, Arctic air is settling in behind it, locking entire regions into prolonged periods of sub-freezing temperatures. For communities already stretched thin by power outages, supply shortages, and hazardous roads, the coming days could prove even more challenging. Emergency officials are urging residents to limit travel, conserve heat where possible, and check on vulnerable neighbors who may be struggling to stay warm. At the same time, transportation networks remain under pressure. Airlines are working to recover from thousands of cancellations, but with more cold and wind in the forecast, delays could persist. Travelers are being warned to expect ripple effects well beyond the areas hit hardest by snow, as aircraft and crews are displaced across the country. For many families, winter travel plans have already been disrupted, adding frustration to an already stressful season. While weather dominates daily life for millions, the political fallout in Washington is still unfolding. Lawmakers now face a narrow 2-week window to resolve the funding dispute at the heart of the partial government shutdown. Negotiations over the future of immigration enforcement are expected to be intense, with neither side showing signs of backing down. Democrats are demanding firm commitments to reforms before restoring full funding to the Department of Homeland Security, while Republicans argue that limiting enforcement tools could compromise public safety. Behind the scenes, federal workers are watching closely. Although some agencies remain funded through the fall, others could soon feel the effects if the shutdown drags on. Missed paychecks, delayed services, and reduced staffing could quickly turn a political stalemate into a real-world hardship for thousands of families. Travelers, too, could feel the impact, with potential delays at airports if staffing shortages worsen. For those who rely on food assistance, uncertainty is already becoming reality. The new SNAP work requirements taking effect mean millions must now meet stricter conditions to maintain benefits. Advocates warn that older adults and caregivers may be hit especially hard, forced to navigate new rules at a time when the cost of living remains high. Supporters of the changes argue they encourage workforce participation, but critics say the timing could not be worse, particularly as extreme weather strains, household budgets, and access to resources. Meanwhile, questions surrounding accountability continue to linger in the wake of the Epstein document release. Lawmakers are pressing for greater transparency, and survivors are calling for reforms that prioritize their safety and dignity. The demand for answers has not faded, and the pressure on the Justice Department is growing as the public seeks clarity about what was known, what was done, and what still remains hidden. Across the country, the emotional toll of recent tragedies is being felt in quieter ways. In Gloucester, Massachusetts, the fishing community continues to mourn the crew members lost at sea. Flags fly at half-staff, memorials grow along the harbor, and families wait for investigations to bring some understanding of how a routine return home turned into disaster. It is a reminder of how quickly lives can change and how dangerous essential work can be, even far from headlines and cameras. In moments like these, attention often shifts to the familiar faces that have shaped American culture. The passing of Demond Wilson has prompted many to revisit episodes of Sanford and Son, recalling not just laughter, but a time when television brought people together in shared moments of joy. His legacy, both on screen and through his later work as a minister, reflects the many ways one life can touch others. As the nation moves forward, there is a sense of collective fatigue, but also resilience. From linemen restoring power in frozen towns, to firefighters clearing hydrants in sub-zero wind chills, to neighbors checking on one another after storms, countless acts of quiet determination are playing out every day. These stories may not dominate the headlines, but they form the backbone of how communities endure difficult times.